Hi, I'm Sonia Lippe. I'm the Modeling and Simulation Technical SME supporting the Foundations Division for the Air Force Agency for Modeling and Simulation. And I would like to discuss with you today the concepts of data-centric. We have been successfully pulling together multiple simulations and simulators for many years, and it started with the DIS and HLA era. However, with the new introduction of a multi-domain operations, we couldn't get there from here with the same infrastructure that we have. During the Joint Tech Air AOA study, we identified 4 training gaps, which were the electromagnetic operating environment, multi-level security, interoperability, and accurate representation. The current legacy training architecture no longer meets the needs to address these main gaps, and all of those gaps were data-related. Next slide. Therefore, we need to transform our thinking. The siloed introduction from the simulators and the simulation concepts of the past were focused on specific requirements for a specific platform. So we looked at the requirements and developed the system and application, and then we looked at the network infrastructure, and then we identified the data. The data was centered inside the simulator components and not towards the enterprise information, much of what we need to do for our multi-domain operations. And we had limited data reuse. So to think data-centric, we had to understand the requirements and think data first, where data and information has that enterprise perspective, and get to maximum data reuse and ensure data is protected as a strategic asset so that we can start incorporating multi-level security. And then we get to the network infrastructure, and then the simulations and the applications that are used can be changed as our systems are updated. To come to the data-centric definition, we looked at multiple unifying strategies. The DoD data strategy, which told us to use data as a strategic asset. The DoD cloud strategy, where we needed to have an enterprise focus on movement to the cloud, and the DoD digital engineering strategy, which was looking at models and authoritative data, innovation, culture, and digital engineering, which were vitally important to moving forward and transforming the infrastructure that we have. We need to understand from the DoD cybersecurity that strengthen and secure the information, the DoD digital modernization strategy, which told us to use infrastructure and innovation to data centricity, and the DoD artificial intelligence strategy to include U.S. Air Force Annex, to purposely consider and include AI. In order to use AI, we actually had to have data, and it couldn't be centralized in specific silos. So we had to pull it out and look at it across the enterprise. So therefore, we came up with a definition that data central exists long after applications and infrastructure. We're going to strive to eliminate our data silos and multiple instances of data so that we can get to the true source of the data. And the data centricity requires a common data framework with data governance, a data architecture, data standards, and facilitation of that real-time information. We want to recognize data as our critical strategic asset, not just within the operational world, but within the operational training infrastructure. Next slide. So we've developed several key principles, data-centric principles, where data is an Air Force asset. We support the Air Force operational training infrastructure mission and strategy. That data is shareable and accessible to authorized users. And that's the key components for the multi-level security. That data has a common vocabulary and definitions, and data is protected at creation, curation, and when shared. Next slide. We have multiple building blocks to this. For our security, we have to have metadata standards, but focused not just on the definition and ontology, but also on that secure aspect, so that we have metadata standards that are focused on the security. We have zero trust starting from the beginning when somebody logs into a machine all the way to the completion and access to that data so that they have the rights and accessibility to see the data. We have our various data stores, and to bring them together, which includes an M&S library, a data mesh, and data fabric, which we can explain to you and discuss further in our booth. And to get to that shared understanding, we have to have a common ontology, and we have to understand how we're going to do the data messaging. So it's different than understanding our data state, but actually the data messaging so we can get to that common data and share it across everyone. We have to start incorporating data operations, which involves data design thinking and modular services. And with data management, we need our data governance and our data discovery. Next slide. We have to ensure that the data-centric enables our future capabilities. Right now, we are currently at AFAMS, we're ideating and we're learning. So we're understanding what are the components that we need to change to further access and use the data and get it to that shared environment. We need to provide 21st century simulation capabilities so that we can respond to the various changes. Currently, we're trying to understand what does it mean to have an airman for life. So from the start, if we can access their training records from the start and get them moving towards the mission aspect, what does that look like so that we can have that airman for life and the training records follow the airman, not just to his individual records, but to the collective. And then we need to model the best industry practices on the common design patterns that exist. Things like the strangler fig pattern, is that useful? Can we actually use our simulations and our simulators right now and modify the internal structures so that we can pull the data out and access the data, but using a different approach so that we're not just throwing everything away, we're actually using all of this breadth of knowledge that we have, reshaping it to a different paradigm of that data-centric concept. The best that we can do is start looking at moving with the digital engineering process so that we go and do the lean startups. And one of the components is the CSTE as a lean startup, to understand what is the momentum and what are the aspects that we can use. And the same is to be said for a lot of the AFWorks cyber products that are out there. They're using those lean processes and what does exist and how we can use it. And then when we go to full production, does it mean just reshaping what we have, or do we need to develop something new? But it requires cost-effective modernization to create a shared environment so that the warfighter is involved in training in the same environment together. I want to say thank you for listening to this, and if you would like to learn more about the data-centric concepts and the parts that go into it to make it successful, please discuss this with me, Sonia Lippe, and Mark Ashford when we will be in the AFAMS booth. Thank you.